You know, as they say, a man or a person who needs no introduction. For those of you who may not know, this here is Baba Professor James Small, historian, writer, scholar, Pan-Africanist, organizer, entrepreneur, confidant to so many within the movement, a mentee, Brother El Hajj Miguel Shabazz, Malcolm X, mentee of Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Ben, so many others. So tonight we're going to be speaking with Professor Small on the subject of the political future of Black America. My name is Dashan Farad. I'm a reporter, journalist for the GoPro Radio Network. I also handle public relations for the Silver Stars Media Complex. This is what this is, multimedia complex, which is affiliated, of course, with Prodigal Sons and Daughters. But we're going to speak with Professor Smalls for a few minutes, and then afterwards, we're going to take Q&A from the audience. So we're going to begin. First of all, Baba, welcome.
Thank you, Deshaun. You're quite a reporter, and I've known Brother Deshaun for years. I mean, he's always there where something's going on in this community, the African community in America. He's always there.
Well, I'm gonna say this here, and I put this up on Facebook 2 weeks ago, and I put this up a few times. You know, as a journalist and as an activist and as an organizer, I've had the honor of crossing paths with many phenomenal people. You know, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would always say, friendship in all walks of life. So Professor Small is actually in that top category of remarkable, phenomenal people that I'm honored to know, and something that I've never told Professor Small. In terms of being a scholar and a young teacher, Professor Small is the one that I say ordained me. And when I say ordained me for that, is that, you know, when one time he said to me, you know, brother, you know, you're a young teacher, people are listening to you, make sure you do this, that, and the third. Once he said that, as far as I'm concerned, I became an African-centered scholar, even though I was already writing. So he ordained me that, okay? So we're gonna get right into this discussion. Professor Small, okay, we're looking at a very crucial election. Of course, just about every election is crucial. And it appears that Black folk are panicking. Every 4 years, we seem to panic collectively at the possibility of a Republican taking the White House or the Republicans taking Congress. But since 2016, it appears that Trump has been our main concern. How do you feel now? Okay, we saw the progress, or some might say the non-progress, of having our first Black president. I should say undisputed Black president. Black, because we're not going to get into the 5 presidents thing right now.
Oh, what? Black president?
I said undisputed, like in other words, we know that he's Black, and of course, we know about the 5 presidents J. Rogers spoke about.
Right.
And I remember that time when I was with you at ASCAC and Howard, and you and Dr. Browder, you clarified that. You said, no, Obama was actually the first one that
we elected and put in the office. See, we got to stop being afraid of accepting what we do. Let me deal with this question of, was he Black? Is she Black? That's the silliest question in the world. I don't know where Black folks' head has gone with that one. I'm married for 53 years to the most beautiful woman. She don't think I think she's the most beautiful woman, the most beautiful human being I've ever met. Her mother's Tamil Indian from southern India, just like Sister Harris's mom. If anybody know anything about the Dalit people of India, they call themselves Dalit. White people call them untouchables or Dravidians. They call themselves Dalits, and they have a couple of other names. They're the indigenous population of India. There is almost as many black-skinned humans in India as there is on the continent of Africa, right? This young lady, I have to speak about her first, and then we can talk about the nation's politics, comes out of that community. Her mom spoke Tamil. I'll tell you clearly, they're from the South. But the Black Indian population isn't just in the South. That's the base population. They're in the center of the continent. There's a group of them who are still considered to be at war with India. India labeled them as being the Marxists, and they're in the center of the continent. There's millions of them on the border with Pakistan and in Pakistan and in northern India. There's millions and millions of Kamala Harris, almost all darker than her, in India. You know, our President Barack Obama's father was from Kenya. That's a place in Africa for those people who got confused, which is the same place all of our parents or great parents came from. His mom was a European lady, and he was raised by this European lady and her Asian husband, and then later in his late teens and early adulthood by his white grandmother and grandfather, and it did not stop him from being black, you know. We know that the African, and we are the superior being. I don't care who got a problem with that. We are the genesis of the human family. That's scientifically sound. All other human beings are mutations off of the African gene pool. When the first African was created, it was the thing we call God itself. Okay, and we need to get that real straight. If nothing exists, if something is omnipotent, omnipresent, omnipotent, and supreme, and we call it the divine, Oludumare, Allah, Jinyami, whatever we want to call it, it is the only thing that exists. Anything else that come into existence is a replica of aspect of it. Simple as that. No science can disprove that. No theology can disprove that. Okay? So the first human being was an African woman that came as a result of the thing you call God deciding to replicate an aspect of itself in that manner. And out of that came the rest of us. Don't get yourself confused. That lady, Miss Harris, who so many of our people are having this negative discussion about, was raised in a black community in Oakland by her black Indian mama in a black Baptist church with black African American cultural experience. Her mother was an activist, one of the profound, and her father were very involved in politics in Oakland and in San Francisco. There was an organization that was founded by Queen Mother Moore and Maulana Karanga. It was called the the Afro-American Association. Most of you probably never heard of it. I went to a couple of his meetings. I might have met her mom, didn't know, back in the 60s when I lived in California. Maulana Karanga belonged to that organization before he built us. It was headed by a brother named Donald Warden. Many of you know him as a Muslim leader called El Mansour. He's written a number of books. He was an extraordinary attorney and a black activist. His brother was James Warden. That's James Shabazz, who was Malcolm X's secretary after Malcolm left the nation. That organization, the Afro-American Association, of which Sister Harris' mom belonged, nearly every activist that from Danny Glover to over to Shaka at that point was a part of that formulation in California. That should tell you something about the lady's foundation. And I've heard some people made negative statements about her relationship to Willie Brown. Brother Brown was the most powerful black or white politician in the state of California probably ever. All right? And the power that black holds in so many offices in California has to do with Willie Brown's leadership. And to make negative references because she was mentored by this great political mind shows the ignorance of those who are making those negative references. And then there are those who say, well, she was a district attorney and she put people in jail. Well, most of the people I'm sure that she put in jail needed to be there. If you're selling dope in the black community, you need to be in jail. If you're robbing people in the black community, you need to be in jail. I would give you some other remedies, but we don't want to say that. But how all of a sudden criminals become the sympathetic element of the struggle and not the people who remove the criminals from our streets. And if you don't get things confused, you don't want me to respond to that. So let's keep it going like we're going, okay? I'm talking about Sister Harris because she's going to be the next president of the United States, because we're going to see that she be the next president of the United States. But we need to show more respect for black women, black men. This is on black men. I'm not saying black women being disrespectful to this black woman. I'm saying black men opening their mouths on TV and radio and other media being disrespectful to this black woman as an act of being disrespectful to black women in general. And we need to check ourselves. That's what I'm seeing, right? The Democratic Party is our only option. The little preacher brother, he's not an option to lead us to any kind of position of influence and power. The Kennedy man, he's not an option. He needs to go get some psychiatric counseling. He's not an option. Certainly Trump and his alliance with the right-wing, anti-African element of this nation, and to those corporate structures that would prefer seeing the economic, social, and cultural status quo of black Americans not being able to run their own lives, they're not an option. The Democratic Party's foundation right now, whether you like it or not, is black African Americans. We're the majority of the foundation in that party. And black women is the majority of the leadership of that party. Stop blinding yourself. And stop lying to yourself. Okay? Look and see what you see. Otherwise, you won't be able to use the tool that's available for your use. And for those of us who talk about God and divine and all of this stuff, when the divine puts stuff out for you, you reject it without even thinking about it. Right now, our primary jobs as human beings, but speaking just of the Africans who live in the Americas, is to provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security for ourselves and our families. The question then must be, how do we do this? And Malcolm X said, when somebody asked him, Brother Minister Malcolm, what do you mean by black nationalism? He said, black nationalism is being in control in the economic, politics, and culture where you live. Now, in order to control economic, politics, and culture where you live so you can provide the food, clothing, shelter, and safety for your family, you've got to get control of land, labor, and resources where you live. Now, how do you do all of that? You got to control the political structure where you live, meaning you got to be the city council person, you got to be the district attorney, you've got to be the school board president, you got to be the one in charge of the organization that deals with distribution of land, you've got to be the police. I tell young black men, join the police force. I've been saying this for decades, and they tell me, I don't want to be the pig. So you'd rather the Klan be the pig so you can complain how he's shooting you? Or would you rather be the policeman that don't become a pig, right? I tell young black people, join the army, join the military. I don't want to fight for the enemy. Some of the greatest leaders we've had in this country served in different forms of the military, and it didn't turn them against their people. I served in the military. My pops, who was a labor leader, served in the military. My brothers, who were very political activists, served in Korea. My uncle, who was one of my greatest teachers, served in the Second World War. My great-uncle helped to found the CIA. He was in Army intelligence after the First World War, and he never missed a day not fighting for black people. So that weak answer is not enough. And here's why I said join the military. Most of you can't shoot anybody anyway. The only people you shoot is our women and children in the streets of our community. You're certainly not shooting the enemies and those who back the likes of Trump and others and who've been terrorizing us for years. So maybe if you learn what to do with a weapon and the responsibility of handling a weapon, you would be a better human being when it comes to having to relate to a weapon. But the other thing, and others are beating us, if you look at other communities, then we complaining about the immigrants community, they're just smarter than you. They know joining the military mean I get at the head of the line for the civil service job when I come home. I'm at the head of the line for the post office job, for the sanitation job, and for the police department because I get extra points for having been in the military. And you said, oh, they're giving them. They're not giving them. They're outsmarting you because you're too big of a, not you in the room, you who hear this, who are my brothers out there. And I'm speaking to the brothers because we're talking about the future of black politics and black community. You can't be cowards and be a father. You can't be a coward and be a leader of your community. You can't be a coward and protect your women and children. And the behavior that I'm seeing across the black community in the spectrum of too many of our black men is a cowardism that don't allow them to prepare themselves to provide that food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security, to take control of the economic, politics, and culture, and to ensure that they're in charge of land, labor, and resources where we live. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about politics. You can't have none of that if you don't vote. Okay, you can't have none of that. And if you think you're going to do it in an armed revolution, we tried that in the 60s more heavily than you know, and that's why we still got political prisoners in the penitentiary that most of us don't even try to bring home. Some been there for 40-something years, who gave their lives as teenagers and young men and women for us, and we don't even know their names. So I know you're not going to pick up no guns, because we pick up the guns and you didn't follow us. And we paid a dear price. You didn't follow us. This country have a method of having political power in the communities where you live. That method involves this process called voting. Our elders and earlier politicians understood that method, and so they fought in the streets of the South, particularly in the North as well, but particularly in the South, to ensure that we get the franchise to use the vote in the election process that defines how this political structure works. And are we spitting in the face of all of those ancestors? How many of us have really studied Martin Luther King? We haven't studied him. If you really studied Martin Luther King, Dr. King was a much more militant activist than Malcolm was. His speeches were more politically revolutionary than most of Malcolm's speeches. But the media defined both of them to you. The white media defined them to you and tell you what category you're supposed to put each one, and then you get confused on what you were told, and you didn't really listen to what was said. Dr. King was in 1957 in Ghana with Kwame Nkrumah when he was being inaugurated, and he came back home and he wrote a speech. How many persons have ever read the speech that he wrote when he came back from Ghana? You can get it online. It's called The Birth of a New Nation. You want to hear an analysis of colonialism and a projection for what the Pan-African future should look like? Read Dr. King's speech, The Birth of a New Nation, written back in 1957. You need to really understand what politics is. How does the government work? And when I went to school, we had, and probably a couple of people in here that's the older than I am. I'm rocking towards 80 right now. We had civics. In every school, we had to learn civics. And that was how this government worked and how the citizen involved itself in the government. At some point, they took it out of the school system. So this generation don't even know there was such a course called civics, but that they taught us how the government worked and how you could participate in the working of the government. Because at some point, they decide, when black folks started getting the voting franchise, we don't want them to learn how this machinery work because they may take over the machinery and make it work for them.